South Koreans stage a demonstration to protest the terms of the proposed truce between the United Nations and the Communists. The truce seemed imminent until President Syngman Rhee demanded unification of Korea and withdrawal of the Chinese Communists. Defiantly, he released 25,000 anti-communist POWs and endangered hopes for peace for his country. The biggest air raid of the war sends towers of flame rolling hundreds of feet over Incheon, the port city of Seoul. A fuel dump becomes a sea of searing fire and exploding gas as troops try to keep the flames from spreading. Oil drums are bounced 100 feet in the air by terrific explosions. It's the most successful air attack yet by the Reds. On the ground, columns of smoke can be seen 35 miles away. Hours later, the fire rages on. 25,000 anti-Red prisoners of war flee their stockades, freed by South Korean guards on orders from Syngman Rhee in defiance of the UN command. American soldiers mend the barbed wire fences around the compounds as a sullen handful of recaptured POWs is watched by ROK sentries. Soon, United States troops arrive at the stockade to stand by in case of new revolts by the prisoners. Quickly, the South Korean guards are dismissed and replaced by the Americans. Grimly, the GIs stand guard over a ghost compound in Korea.
Berlin seethes with revolt in the worst uprising against Red rule since the end of the war. Roaming through the smoking streets of the Soviet sector are unruly mobs of rioting workers. Only when the heavily armed Soviet police, troops, and tanks appear do the crowds disperse. U.S. High Commissioner James Conant makes a surprise visit to the border between the western and eastern zones to inspect the destruction and desolation. An uneasy quiet has settled over the deserted streets, which had echoed to gunfire and shouting, milling mobs. Elevated railway tracks and stations are stilled. And on the border, Russian and East Berlin police set up checkpoints for persons seeking admission into the troubled Soviet zone. Despite martial law, the rioting spreads across East Germany from Berlin, half slave, half free. In Japan, an Army Globemaster transport plane crashed to the earth in the worst disaster in aviation history. All of the Korea-bound 129 American servicemen aboard were killed. The giant aircraft developed engine trouble soon after takeoff. Carrying 2 decks of passengers, the C-124 was making a desperate attempt to return to its air base near Tokyo when it went into its final spin. There was a flash and a roar as its 3,000-gallon fuel reservoir went up in flames, enveloping the dead and the dying. The man driving this car with the Missouri license plates is Mr. Harry S. Truman. He and his wife are en route to Washington to see some old friends. At Frederick, Maryland, Mr. Truman pulls into a gas station on the last leg of the 2-day trip from Independence. Like most tourists, he travels in his shirt sleeves and keeps close track of where he is. Mr. Truman hasn't been to the Capitol since January 20th, when Dwight D. Eisenhower took over his job. He has no plans to see his successor. At their destination, the Trumans check in for accommodations somewhat less spacious than they were accustomed to on Pennsylvania Avenue, where they used to live.
At the 16th International Golden Gloves Championships in Chicago, the Windy City's Sammy Williams in the light trunks is making Jacques Chandeau of France wish he'd missed the boat for this rousing light middleweight scrap. Williams is a busy belter, banging beauties to the body. Windy City Walloper is winded, but the Frenchman makes his bid too late. Williams gets the nod as the U.S. team edges the Europeans 6-4 in the International Golden Gloves. Here's the newest nightclub sensation in Salzburg, Austria. Round and round goes Jenny while her hubby gets ready to prove his flaming devotion. It takes a dead-eyed Dick with a steady hand. And it looks looks like both of them are having a dizzy time as he tries to hurl the flaming knives into the whirling disc instead of into his wife. Nightclubbers in Salzburg love the act, and so it seems does the Smiling Jenny. The traditional Royal Hunt Cup race at Ascot brings out a big, gaily dressed crowd despite leaden, dripping skies. The rain has stopped, however, when Queen Elizabeth, whose colt choir boy has entered, arrives with the royal family. The crowd is busy trying to pick a winner as the 21-horse field goes to the post. And they're off in the 7.5 furlong sprint for one of England's most coveted racing prizes. Splitting into two bunches, that's Choir Boy on the outside driving for the lead near the far rail. The excited young queen sees her horse pound toward the finish line in a thrilling stretch duel with Brunetto. But it's Choir Boy under the wire, the winner. Making their way through the crowd, Elizabeth and Philip walk to the unsaddling enclosure. Choir Boy carries the royal purple silks of his proud owner to victory in the Royal Hunt Cup.